Our next session is a special one. In this session, we will not only talk about cybersecurity, from being defensive to playing offense, but before we start the session, we will also launch a white paper on Karnataka cyber powering India. This white paper is jointly produced by EY and FinTech Festival India and will be launched by Naganand Doraswamy, Managing Partner and Founder, Idea Spring Capital, who later will moderate this session on cybersecurity. Also joining this white paper launch and the session is Dr. Sriram Birudavolu, Chief Executive Officer of Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, Data Security Council of India. And also joining them is Mr. Sridhar Sidhu, Senior Vice President of Information and Cybersecurity Group, Wells Fargo, and Mitra Bhanu Chaudhary, Director, Economic Development and Infrastructure with EY. Welcome to the FinTech Festival India, everyone. The stage is yours for the launch of white paper and conversations on cybersecurity.
So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this panel on cybersecurity. And many thanks for having me here. I think there's not a single day where you don't read about cybersecurity in papers. It's become a very, very hot topic, and also the reasons for this becoming a very hot topic is because I think access to devices, people is everywhere these days. Anything that has wireless access or internet access is subject to some kind of spoofing or some kind of attacks or whatever. So, whether you look at governments, you look at utility companies, you look at financial companies, you look at people, you look at automobiles, everything, each of these has some element in it where there is some access that can be potentially misutilized by people with invalid or bad intentions. And hence, there is a new field that has emerged where people are trying to protect unwanted access, unwanted intrusions into it, and see how best to ensure that people are protected, missions are protected, nations are protected, factories are protected, and hence very interesting thought has come into this whole area. And we hear bioterrorism, but now in parallel to bioterrorism, we are hearing about cyber terrorism, cyber attacks, and bringing cyber warfare. So this is a very hot topic, and extremely glad to have two very distinguished gentlemen along with me who have deep expertise and experience in this space, looking at both from an industry perspective and from a government perspective. And then I will start off by asking the landscape question first, and probably Sidhu, I will go with you first since you are next to me, and Sriram is with us, but on the virtually. But Sriram, glad to have you here as well. I'll come to you next on this. So in general landscape, right now, digital transformation is a given. We know it's happening across every single sector, every single government, any place you can look at. So how has the landscape evolved, changed over the past 15, 20 years, and why has this become such a big topic? And also, what are the mechanisms, like you're talking about it a couple of days ago, the defense versus offense approaches. So would love to hear both of your thoughts about this landscape, and we'll take it from there. So Sidhu, you first.
Yeah. Sure. It's a very great question. Before I answer that, I need to take a couple of caveats. One, I'm representing myself in my individual capacity. Two, whatever I say here is not attributable to either my current employer or the previous employers. So with that caveats out.
Good disclaimers, I should say.
with those comes with working for a regulatory organizations. So yeah, Naganand, as you rightly mentioned, technology evolvement and subsequently technology adoption into every industry has happened in the last 25 plus years. If you look at probably online services, almost started 25 years ago. Each industry has taken different steps depending on what the customer needs are, and those are predominantly reasonably well planned, right? What happened subsequently, if you look at post financial meltdown in 2008, 2009, the efficiency levels of other industry segments became very, very critical. That led to some extent, managing the last mile delivery through a digital channels, right? So that was reasonably planned in certain segments of industries over a period of time. But unfortunately, what happened probably late 2019, early 2020 is thanks to pandemic, earlier only certain segments of industries and certain players within the industry were playing the digital last mile, right? Which are reasonably planned large organizations. But come pandemic, every industry player, small, big, medium, had to adapt to the last mile delivery through digital channels. That fundamentally resulted in unplanned new types of assets, leading to configuration challenges, leading to probably lack of agility to manage the risks that are coming through. So these are fundamentally a plethora of challenges. Some organizations that have got a better plans and better ahead of time manage to stay afloat. Some organizations have got challenges of their own. And all these things, thanks to the nation state actors that are happening, particularly probably fourth quarter of 2020, that resulted in a lot of collateral damages. When I say collateral damages, there were certain targets, but to manage those targets, hundreds of thousands of others became target. Right? It's like a David and Goliath situation. A small and medium enterprise will never ever be able to manage this kind of a scenario, while the large organizations can manage. So this is going to continue absolutely for some more time. We can talk about what other things organizations can do to manage, what governments can do. We can definitely discuss that. But it is not a level playing field. And it is not a level playing field even for large corporates or to a smaller player in the digital channels. So somebody needs to do something to make it a level playing field.
I know, good. And then you bring out a very good point on the pandemic, right? Because I jokingly tell people when we used to do ISO 27000, everything, you say if one facility goes down, how are you going to be operate? Now the question is, no one is going to any facility, how will you still be operational? And that's a different ball game, it's like a very, very hard game. We'll discuss more about that as we go through this conversation. So now, Sriram, I'll come to you to get your thoughts on, your how do you see the landscape has evolved, and what are some of the things that you think have drastically changed in the past decade or so?
Thank you very much, Naganan. Actually, an exciting topic and discussion here. So one of the things is digital transformation has engulfed every aspect of life, digitalization. In fact, the UN says that there was a study done. It says that every 10% point increase in the speed of high-speed internet leads to a 1.3% growth in GDP. Okay, and this cybersecurity has been recognized as one of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, on par with the others. So I'll give you a few statistics to do that. Actually, the cyber risks were considered. If you were to take the Global Alliance with a Z, those people did the cyber risk. They measure the risks. What are the top 10 risks in the world? And in 2013, cyber risks stood at the position 13, I think. And today they are at number 1. So what is the largest risk? I mean, all the environmental disasters, everything else comes next. Okay. So which means it is something a lot to be said for. In fact, when Prime Minister Modi went to different countries on a tour a few years ago and asked the world leaders, saying that what are the top 3 things that keep them awake at night, one of them invariably turned out to be cyber risks. You can see it all around you. Cyber touches every aspect, some component or the other touches every aspect of life, and it is increasing. Whether your personal life, you take it, whether you're, studying on the internet, doing courses, or whether you're booking a cab, or whether you're ordering groceries, especially in the work from home scenario, you see that in working, cloud, social media, everything. Okay, your investments, you're doing financial transactions, everything has gone online. Going to the organization level and the nation state level and the economy level now, with IoT and all, the threats are increasing and there is rampant automation around the corner. So with all of these things, this is it's extremely important to recognize this, because, and the countries are recognizing it, because you see that most of the laws so far, if you see in the world today, they are built for physical goods and for human lives, but not for the cyber world. Okay, so now privacy laws are coming up. in some 50 countries around the world, and also these cyber law, new cyber frameworks are coming up to replace the old IT laws, IT security, IT Act and all. So these are very much needed, and because digital transformation is a must, it has a magnifier effect in volume, speed, efficiency, intelligence, you name it, and that's going to percolate everything, even in cyber physical system, autonomous cars or robots, or everything is you see around is smart, 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 and getting smarter. So in that respect, we should recognize this huge tsunami, if you were to call it, has come about, and we need to find ways to deal with it and really leverage and ride on top of it. Otherwise, we will be completely crushed by that. Everything, industries to the safety of our systems, right? Entire industry have been disrupted. Yeah.
Like both.
So one small thing is that if you were to see the trillion-dollar companies today, or all these big ones, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and all these are planet-scale companies now, and they were startups some 20 years ago or something. So you see the kind of level and force, the scale of disruption that has happened.
Completely agree with what you're saying, Sriram, and also to Sidhu's point. Now, if you look at it, you read about dark web, you read about ransomware, you read about malwares, and countries being attacked, and then elections being rigged, and a whole bunch of things are happening all across the world, and it's affecting every single person, company, government, and name what have you, right? Because there is a chip in every single place, and that chip has a wireless access, and as soon as you have wireless access, means something can happen with that, right? So there's a significant transformation there. So like we know that it's impacting everybody. So what do people need to do? What do companies need to do? What do governments need to do to manage and handle this? Because it is at a very, very large scale now. So what do you guys see happening at every single of these levels? How do you, first of all, build systems that can thwart these attacks? Number two, what can you do to protect these systems? Both becomes important. So Sriram, I'll start with you on that question to get your thoughts on, you might want to cover some segment, and hopefully Sidhu can cover the other segments, but I'll start with you to say what do people and companies and governments need to do to manage this threat that's happening?
Yes, so one of the first thing is a very strong recognition of the fact that the world has changed now, and we need to act accordingly. For example, privacy law. So it's already a joint parliamentary committee stage, personal data protection bill. And now there is another bill in the pipeline, which is for non-personal data, which is coming up. Okay. And the cyber laws are going to change. And we need to understand that systems have gotten really sophisticated with AI and ML. There are layers. So who has actually taken the decision? As one example goes, saying that if an autonomous car has hit and killed somebody, who is responsible? Is it the car owner? Is it the guy who sold him the car, the dealer? Or is it the manufacturer, or the guy who sold him the software, or the guy who trained the data on it? So there are various questions that come up which need to be resolved. And this is all in work in progress. GDPR took about 40 years in the making. India was much faster. So in every sector, if you see that there are transformations happening, and there is a acute recognition of that. If you were to take, when say government of Telangana and all, it has its own cyber framework, and it is incentivizing many things, a scheme, startup cyber security. So this is a very a deep problem. And as far as individuals and organizations grow, as far as they go, you see that there's need for awareness on one front. So it is people, technology, processes. Technology needs to be improved with intelligence and automation, so that there is less burden on people to be on their toes all the time. People need to be trained, processes need to be enhanced, and it needs to be seamless. And of course, there is intelligence. Intelligence meaning threat intelligence and other types of intelligence that are coming in. Obviously, if you have a firewall, you cannot replace the firewall device every year. There needs to be a constant intelligence feed, which is happening every day, right? So in that respect, if these things are taken care, and also there's a lot of thought that has gone behind the frameworks. Okay, for example, the NIST framework, the ENISA framework for consumer devices, which has come up in Europe. Okay, safety of consumer devices. If new technologies like 5G come in, it comes with attendant risks and IoT and all. It enables that is great. But again, there is a cyber component and then there is cyber security component also there. So in that respect, we need to take these frameworks very seriously, okay, and then do that. And also policies of data classification and all, a lot of study has already gone in there. And then we should do that. You cannot protect all the assets. The critical assets you should pay more attention to. Pretty much the same as in your home. You'll not pay as much attention to some garden chairs and all lying outside as much as to your property documents and jewelry and other things, right? So that is the same way that you need to pay attention to your data assets and other transactions also. Okay. So there are many things that can be done. Education is number one at all levels. Obviously, a person who is an employee, he needs to have one level of protection and safeguards and all built in to protect him. And also there should be no data, there should be data leak prevention and all that. But a system administrator or a network administrator, much more so. Okay, because that can cause much larger impact. So please do refer to DSCI frameworks and guidelines also. There are a lot of reports produced. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thanks, Sriram, for giving the perspective on the regulation and the framework. But Sidhu, coming to you, how do you people, there's only that much you can do when people write passwords on the board, right? And we have seen that happen, and people are told, and passwords are now becoming stronger, and that is a protection at the individual level. But companies, governments, everybody has to be protected. So how do you see the industry now changing to be able to address in strengthening the attacks and guarding themselves against these attacks? Because whatever you do, the other side is getting more intelligent, right? If you try to fix A, they'll do B, then you fix B, then it's like a constant who can stay on top of the other, and you always a catch-up game at times, right? So how do you see protecting hence people and the industries and the governments from all these attacks that happen around us all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a loaded question. It has got different connotations to it. I'll probably start with the industry side of the world, right? Again, always we look at what is the risk, what is the investment that I'm going to make, and what is going to be the return of risk reduction. So if you take that lens, right, three different types of industries. One is the large global organizations, medium enterprises, and small enterprises. Now, as I mentioned earlier, everybody need to be digital. Everybody need to be collaborating online. And the risks these days are coming to be the same across the industry segments. So for small organizations to start with, I will tell them three things. You cannot compete in the current scenario unless you are digital. So all you need to do is to look at finding some good consultant to help you to enable and adapt you to public cloud. You cannot do on your own infrastructure, which is not economically viable in the long run. If you're a small organization, look for a public cloud adoption as soon as possible and find out those finite public cloud services, including security and recoverability. Buy those services, and most importantly, have an understanding of what your responsibilities are as the customer of the public cloud services. If they do these three things, like the 2020, as I mentioned, if it is a collateral damage, that's once in a while, but at least if you are on public cloud, your recoverability is a little faster. You may have some problem, but you will stand up. But if you look at, again, the medium-sized enterprises, right, you can't go public and complete public cloud for whatever underlying technical, geopolitical, or regulatory reasons. So you will have a combination of on-prem and public cloud.
Okay.
What you can potentially do is similar to some of smaller customers or smaller players in the field. But the other thing that is most critical to do for them is to understand how the interplay of public and private is going to happen. And if they do, and most importantly, manage the expectations of the interfaces, right, that becomes little manageable. But the other thing is, don't invest too much on detection and prevention, because detection and prevention in the current cyber threat landscape changing every day, your return on investment is not going to be that big compared to your investment on recoverability. Have investments on recoverability, continuously test them. If you do that, then the probability of you getting up again is a lot faster. Because the reason is, as a medium enterprise, your revenue may be less than $1 billion, but that potentially is the investment in cyber from large global organizations. And then your state, actors, they will have more money than that. So you can't compete with them on detecting and preventing. You still have some ground levels, manage that, but recoverability, pay attention to it. If we come to the large global organizations, they will have a reasonably good amount of asset management, vulnerability management through right configurations and all that. What they need to probably invest more is, with recent changes, invest heavily, either buy or build the software, integrity assurance through third parties. Internally, when you build it, you go through all the processes, controls and all, but if you're buying off the shelf, right, how authentic that's how the whole episode happened in 2020, right? When one of the largest consulting companies can become victim to it, right? The organizations which core security is not their core realm, they can't manage it. So invest, either buy or build the software integrity assurance services for your third parties. Second, have a real-time monitoring of all your third parties. You will be able to recognize the potential susceptibility of those and preempt and then work through them. And then third is the API security, which is interfacing with everything in the world, right? Those three from external standpoint. Internal, every global organization will have many duplicity of security controls. Try aggressively reduce them. And second is make sure that with the latest technologies that you have, you can drop so many control systems, have maybe finite unified control systems, like for example, SASE. Put that in place, try and put that. And third, most importantly, continued education of people. If you do that, at least these industry segments, the return on investment would be better. From a government standpoint, I have three things. I'm not, I never consulted in government, but I can tell these three things first. One, reduce regulatory complexity, right? That is applicable for every country in the world.
Yes, absolutely.
Second is, most important, as a government, play a global role in cyber diplomacy. Like the nuclear diplomacy that happened, that is a known risk, traceable risk. Cyber is not. So without diplomacy, this level playing field will never be set up. So you need to do that. And third, most importantly, as a country, to have that security in place, look at man-in-the-middle kind of scenarios. Today, there are so many people who are hoarding data. They may not be able to decrypt it. But post-quantum, they will be able to decrypt all the data they hoarded, all the sensitive country security data, they can actually decrypt and see it. So those are the things I would expect. Individuals, buy authentic software, buy authentic hardware, buy some security solutions on your laptops and mobile phones, and when you are in doubt, don't click the link. So if you do at least these things primary, there is some hope for, not to be susceptible.
I think the last one you said for individuals, clicking on something, I think that is very, very important, because more often than not, by looking at a message, you will know. And if somebody is offering you free money, don't click. Period, right? That's a very simple thing.
Absolutely.
But coming to your point, Sidhu, on all these aspects, see, the problem in the cybersecurity is the vulnerabilities are at multiple different levels, right? So you have vulnerabilities at the protocol level, you have vulnerabilities at the operating system level, application level, network level, and the human level. So there's like that makes this problem supremely complex.
Yes.
Right. And you made a good point that probably the smaller companies should not build their own network and go outside. But at the same time, to your point, even if you are securing the network, if your data is compromised, you're in deep trouble again.
Yes.
And then you just said people can hold on to data and decrypt it at a later point of time. But we have heard about dark web, right? So when the compromises can happen at each of these levels, it becomes very difficult for organizations to manage it, right? And even to Sriram's point, even if you put processes and procedures in place, it still becomes difficult. And you mentioned a few tips that people could adapt to stop it, but how would you still solve this problem when in every layer presents a different set of challenges?
Yeah, it fundamentally stems from incomplete, inaccurate asset management. If that asset management is done reasonably well, then your ability to configure those assets and monitor with the decent vulnerability assessment management solutions is really strong. What happens is, as Sriram mentioned, people process technology. Process adherence many a time is faulty in any organization you look at, even 0.01% non-adherence. One asset which is not on your asset database, somewhere connected to the extranet, that is enough to create all sorts of problems. So have extremely good asset management and configuration management skill set. Then, as I said, public cloud and private cloud combination, you are reducing your attack surface by reducing your assets themselves. Right? Instead of having individual operating systems running different solutions, your public cloud, your private cloud can reduce your asset base. Accordingly, your ability to manage with the same amount of investment, vulnerability management becomes a lot more efficient. But unfortunately, people always say my organization is unique and I have my application is unique. Well, fine. Those uniquenesses are gone. There are feature-based build-outs that can happen instead of building, orchestrating the solutions to actually meet the customer needs are going to be easier. So if they do these things, possible. But if you look at the last 12 years of breaches that happened, fundamentally 98% of them boil down to privileged users' access credentials being stolen. If we simply have a two-factor authentication or a passwordless authentication, 99% of that risk can be avoided. But how many people, in the interest of user convenience, have a two-factor or a passwordless authentication? Not many.
Not many.
So the science and
Although it's
technology
changing, that is changing. That is changing now. Yeah, most banks are implementing that, and
Absolutely.
that's a good change we are seeing in the industry now. Yeah.
But interfacing banking through a retail to other companies is happening. Is every ecosystem player doing the same thing? It is not. So that's where one weak link is sufficient to create problems for others.
Good. And then to continuation of the same topic, Sriram, coming to you, and probably I'll also get Sidhu's thoughts on this, is how actively do organizations and governments do things like penetrative testing, destructive testing, offensive testing? So how have you seen this evolve, and how seriously you think the governments and the organizations are taking these kinds of testing, even application hardening, right? Hardening of the application. So how have you seen this aspect of it evolve?
So there are, if you look at the tools and the products landscape which are coming in now, many interesting tools are there. Of course, the move is towards AI, automation, and all that. There are, to address a few things, for example, behavioral AI and ML are there. That means even if somebody had the login and password, it checks against some 60, 70 parameters or so, and sees that the place where he's there, the speed at which he's typing, and so on, a host of other parameters, right? So in that, the time of login, everything it checks, scores them. And then even if you had the login password, if they were given to you and you tried to log in into somebody's account, it will prevent you. So such tools are coming up, okay? And this threat intelligence and threat mitigation, which is there, whether it is on cloud or on-prem, we are seeing a shift towards the AI and ML because it's behavior-based. You can't beat zero-day attacks on new systems. Supposing new version of any OS is launched, there are probably vulnerabilities there, okay? So there are zero-day attacks and all of these things. It can mitigate through this behavioral analysis and benchmarking. So it needs to constantly happen. So the day and age of those auditing once a year is gone. There's governance, risk, and compliance, which is very tightly, very well integrated into the entire system itself, which is monitoring the network traffic. And in fact, there are tools we have, people can reach out to me, in which that does secure configuration management. That means the default configuration which is there itself may have loopholes, it is not properly set, or somebody has done some major activity on the network, and after that he has done, say, taking a backup or something else, a reconfiguration, adding some new systems and all, maybe a port is left open. Now it is impossible in thousands of systems to discover the configuration status of all the systems. Earlier you may have checked once and said this is fine, but what about 3 months later? What about 5 months later? What happened? So what about shadow IT and all of these things, like Sidhu was mentioning, saying that you need to have asset management thoroughly. Somebody else may have come in and put one device or something like that, or opened a port. So what we need to have is a constant monitoring, real on-time, real online monitoring, which is happening on the net traffic, Then they catch the anomalies, they catch the abnormal behavior in real time and take actions also in real time, responsive. So this is what the world is tending towards, if you were to ask me. Okay, and of course the awareness and all those are there of the tools, but it needs to be as seamless or transparent as possible, because the users should not be burdened with a lot of things. Okay, so there are various means of checking. For example, if somebody is drawing money at an ATM, then there are several checks and balances one can do. Okay, for example, even let's say his mobile phone is there. Usually you carry your mobile phone. So is this person at the same place where he's drawing the thing as checked against the mobile phone, or his mobile phone is somewhere else and he's somewhere else? Then you find out that there is enough reason to ask a few more questions before you allow him in. And people who are engaging in risky behavior, you can tighten the controls and have him jump through more hoops before he does that, as against the other people. You need not penalize everyone. So in this manner, this kind of dynamic behavioral changes and tightening, you would see that to an extent in the same thing. Supposing you tried to enter password 2-3 times and failed, and suddenly it will ask for an OTP, it will ask for more questions and all that. So dynamically things can change also. Okay.
So Sidhu, coming to extending to what Sriram was saying in terms of minimize human interaction, right? The more humans involved, the more mistakes, hence make it more machine oriented and configuration and automate the whole thing rather than depending on humans, right?
Yeah.
So, but even in addition to that, in your experience looking across multiple different organizations, how much attention is being paid to penetrative testing, destructive testing, and how you see that part evolving? How frequently you would suggest someone do it, and what's the status of that part in that industry?
So, with the threat landscape changing, earlier, maybe 3-4 years ago, the investment mostly was around detection and a response kind of a thing, right? So, considering how the threat landscape is changing, a lot of organizations are also investing in various services. For example, on the detection side of the world or defense side of the world, people have established threat hunting, threat detection services, so that threat detection looks at what the detection control systems that you have, anomalies using AI, ML that at the product level, as Sriram mentioned, the detection services where you literally look at, consider that your detection systems are not working efficiently and hypothesizing and using that hypothesis to find out anomalies already happened. That is all about the defense side of the world. But when you look at the defense, is it sufficient? Not necessarily, because the threat intelligence driven, it's available for everybody, including the perpetrators. So the pace at which they use that intel to penetrate into our networks is extremely, extremely fast. So what we need to do as global organizations or mid-sized companies is to build that offensive security teams. 3 ways of doing that. 1, build our own internal offensive security teams, which will continuously at the application level, network level, keep doing the offensive security research to find out anomalies before the perpetrator finds that. That's 1. Second, right, your security operations center would be there. They would be monitoring. If they detect timely that offensive security work is happening, that means your detection and response is measures known. The time in which your event monitoring team and the threat detection team able to find out, that tells you how mature you are as an organization when the offensive security work is happening. Second is, have good third party has got credentials to do periodic assessments like the offensive security internal team that does, so that you will have a third party view of it. And the third one organizations can do is what we call as a bug bounty program, right? Because there are so many hundreds and thousands of enthusiasts across the world who are interested in finding problems and telling people that, hey, you have a problem here. So we need to, as an organization, give them a channel for what we call as the responsible disclosures, right? That means they are white hat. That means they don't penetrate into the system. They identify the problem and then responsibly disclose, and organizations can evaluate and see, yes, it makes sense, and reward them. So internally, continuous offensive security work, periodic, when I say periodic, at least once in a quarter, external independent party doing the same thing, and a real-time bug bounty program. If these 3 combinedly done, and associate with the intelligence, associate with your own internal asset and infrastructure, and then augment your monitoring and response, we can at least say we have done our best.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is there will be hackers out there, and those hackers are intelligent folks, and they have malicious intent to mess up with your organization, to steal your data.
Absolutely.
So investment hence in security is paramount in organization now. Unlike before where it was not very important, now you have to have a security tech team, one trying to break, one trying to find the breaking happening, stay at ahead of the operating system holes that exist, and hardening your application. So if I were to take away one critical point from what you said, is invest properly in ensuring that you're well secured, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's the key.
Absolutely. And luckily, every board, whether small, big, large organization, boards are reasonably aware this is how critical it is, how it is going to impact the brand. So investments will not be a problem as long as the security function can tell metrics-driven maturity of our defense systems.
Yes.
As long as that is continuously demonstrated, I think there would be investments.
Absolutely. And then boards are very, very concerned about these things, and they're also well aware, and that's progressed quite well. Great. I have a few questions, but before I get to the question, I wanted one forward-looking question. So I'll start with you, Sriram, on this. Your prediction on where this entire cyber industry will evolve next 5 to 10 years. Where do you think it's going to go? What are the significant areas of research and development that's going to happen?
Sorry. Okay. So basically, one is that there's going to be a lot more sectoral focus. Okay. For example, you have cert in, but then you'll also have for healthcare sector, for manufacturing sector, for different wings, because the nature and flavor, banking sector, and so on. We're starting with all the critical sectors first, critical infrastructure first. Okay. So there is going to be a lot more sectoral focus. Then regulations are going to evolve because, as I mentioned, privacy laws are coming out and also cyber laws are coming. So there will be a whole host of this entire industry is built around these in order to provide or cater to this as a baseline. Okay, I'm saying not as the ultimate thing, but at the minimal, you need to comply to that. Then, as I had mentioned, the emerging technologies, AI, ML, blockchain, data analytics, all of these are going to take IoT. All of these are going to come to the forefront, and you will see a lot more traction there in terms of cybersecurity and a lot more awareness, and that will pick up, and new tools will emerge and evolve. Then, of course, there are these other sweeping changes which are coming. People are already talking about 6G, 7G, and all that, but 5G, when it comes through, there's going to be a lot more difference in the way we do things and all that. It will enable many other things to happen which are hitherto not possible. So these are going to really shake up. Then these are really going to sweep across the length and breadth. And there will be several areas across the stack, length and breadth of the stack. For example, hardware security. How do you trust the chip level security? How are you going to secure it? So those labs and all, that is going to evolve a lot. So much can be said there, but for the paucity of time, I will not say that. Okay. And many more tools. You see this as an exciting game in which there is going to be consolidation in some areas, heavy research in some other areas, trust engineering, zero trust architecture, standardization is going to play, and frameworks are going to play a very big role there. So with this, I think I've covered enough. I'll stop here.
You bring a good point. 5G is going to enable a different gamut of applications that hitherto was not possible. And that will throw interesting challenges in the industry as well. So, Sidhu, your thoughts on this, because you are in the forefront in your professional life and also otherwise looking at how this industry is evolving. So, what do you see are the few exciting things you will see coming our way?
Every industry is going to significantly change, as Sriram mentioned, when the 5G comes into place, maybe 2 max years down the line. So banking will change. I don't think it will continue to be as monolithic as it used to be. Healthcare is significantly going to change. The risks are going to continuously evolve. My personal take is, unless each of the large governments in the world doesn't take cognizance of the impact of cyber threats more severe than the nuclear of the 1970s and 80s.
Right.
This will be a bottomless pit, right? I hope there would be some sanity in the cyber diplomacy, so that unless the perpetrators of today are brought to justice faster, identification is difficult these days. Getting them to justice is difficult these days. They have every opportunity to make money. If that chain is not broken, organizations can invest anything and everything, but that is not going to stop them from being vulnerable. So that is one. I would expect probably 2 to 3 years down the line, maybe a G7 or G8 and G20, some common understanding of the framework and collaboration of cyber terrorism. Once that framework is in place, then the second one is to enable businesses the way they are expected to, some consistency on the common expectations of personal privacy. If that is not done, the regulatory overhead continues to be more, and that makes organizations very less nimble, right? Because if you look at US, every state has got their own laws overlaying one another. Can there not be a federal law? Absolutely possible, right? GDPR. So some commonality in the privacy aspects of it, because privacy and security inseparable. So cyber diplomacy, common framework for privacy, and hygiene at the individual level, at the organization level.
Yeah, absolutely.
These are the three pillars. At least if two of them are not strong, particularly the cyber diplomacy and the hygiene, right? We cannot be in the way that we are today. And it is, I don't want to scare people, but that is going to be a challenging situation 2 years down the line.
Correct. I think cyber hygiene, what you bring out, Sidhu, is very, very important. And a lot of people are getting educated about it, but it's still a long ways off. There are a few questions from the audiences that kind of point to the same question on hygiene. How do we create the hygiene? How do you make people aware of it? How do you educate people? So I think that becomes very important. With that, I'll switch to a few questions that have come from the audience who are participating. And the first question is, have you watched Jamtara on Netflix? Which I haven't. Hope either of you have watched it. Let me know. The question is, how innocent people have been ripped off their savings in the name of debit card renewals, etc. What are the institutions doing to safeguard their customers in this interest? And I know, Sidhu, you come from a financial institution. I will not pose this as what your company is doing, but as a more generic question as to what have you seen happening in the industry to protect people from these kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I know the story behind Jamtara. I haven't seen that series per se. Unfortunately, didn't have the time. But I can tell you, one of our industry colleagues in the police force, he's the man behind actually bringing a lot of people to justice there. But here is the thing. Many organizations, again, maturity of digital channels, understanding risks through digital channels is not consistent across every bank. But slowly people are understanding the consumer awareness, most of the banks do. For example, even if you look at one of the largest public sector banks in India, on the main front page of national newspapers, they give education and awareness periodically, right? They will tell you, don't give your, PIN number.
PIN number,
right?
yeah. Or
every wallet holders, when they send you OTP, they will also share that. So it is important not to share your PIN number, right? Some other things, right? And the moment you see that your, phone is not working, you better be mindful, use another device and check with your service provider what is happening. Because SIM cloning is just seconds. And then everything will happen afterwards, and then your SIM will be re-enabled, and you will start getting all the money that is withdrawn.
Correct.
So, the amount of education financial institutions need to do, particularly for the vulnerable category of customers, elderly people who are not very well educated, and particularly the people who are currently using debit cards because of all the Jan Dhan Yojana program that happened. They are not very necessarily literate, right? So those are the people you need to spend a lot of time and effort from India context.
As well, also what I've seen is people get greedy. As soon as they say you can get 1 lakh rupees or something, they click, right? Those are the kinds of things that happen. There's a question for you, Sriram, specifically addressed to you. The question is, what is India doing about data privacy policy? Is our data cheap as our lives are?
So, India is doing a lot. In fact, as I mentioned, the Personal Data Privacy Protection Bill is at the Joint Parliamentary Committee stage. And once it passes, the bill will be an act. And it is doing more in the sense that for non-personal data also, there is another bill in the pipeline. These should be major, major game changers. So that is number one. Then there is an entirely new, which is being cyber framework that is coming up. The law of cyber framework laws are coming up. That is being driven by NSCS, National Security Council Secretariat, which is part of National Security Advisory Agency. Okay, so that will stipulate so many things. So we will no longer have to rely on the old IT Act alone, but there will be an entire new framework that is coming out, the old IT and Telegraph Act and all these things. So which are a little bit sketchy, but still some things are happening, but are in no way poised for this large, the scale and sophistication of attacks or the tsunami of digitalization happening and all of these things, right? So the new framework will hopefully address many of these things, right? And cross-border trade and all of these things also
are coming in, data empowerment and policy architecture, where people are given access to how they want their data to be used and so on and so forth. In addition to that,
yeah. Sure. So if we are doing business here in India, then we also have to be aware of not our own privacy laws, but those of the other countries where we are delivering services and all. So this is going to increase. So there needs to be a large talent pool of people who are cyber experts, as Sidhu had mentioned, cyber diplomats, and also people who are experts in other countries' laws and frameworks and all this. So this is going to go, and that brings the things of this capability building. Okay, where are you going to get all these people from? So I'm very happy to share with you. Probably many of you already know that AICTE, the apex governing body for technical education in India, has approved a complete BTech in cybersecurity, not just computer science, but complete BTech in cybersecurity. Many institutes are eagerly taking it up, so we should have that pool of talent there. So we invite you to explore more.
Comparison to the US ones?
I have left my consulting shoes about 8 years ago, and I have not recently at all had any conversation as a as a consultant with any Indian banks. But that said, I have a good number of friends who are CISOs in the Indian ecosystem. I have reasonable comfort because of the pace at which our technology enablement in India happened. Luckily, we didn't had, as India as a country, didn't had the legacy infrastructure. We started probably late 1990s in digitizing and digitalizing banks. So when the legacy is less, your ability to scale is better, your ability to control is better. Whether that ability is converted into an actual execution and effectiveness, it's a circumstance driven year by year. Probably one organization is better than the other. But with the kind of innovation that is done around Aadhaar infrastructure, a lot of our privacy issues can probably be resolved over a period of time. Again, the complexities of global organizations are different from core India banks working in India. They don't necessarily have a geopolitical scenario compared to global banks. You make some investment decision in some global, one country will have an impact on how you will be perceived, which is not the case with only Indian banks based in India, other than our unhappy neighbors who might want to do something harm to us. So when the landscape is different, right, the ability to control vulnerability is also a lot better.
Got it. So another question here, which is interesting, which is guidance tips on balancing simplified customer journeys and experience with AFA/added security measures. What are the basic hygiene factors that should be incorporated for basic customer hygiene factors? AFA, do you know what is AFA? I don't know what AFA. Do you know what AFA means?
MFA? Or?
No, they said AFA in the question, so not sure. Are you aware of what AFA means, Sriram? Not sure, but let's talk about generic hygiene factor that needs to be incorporated for customer journeys.
Yeah. So for customer journeys, obviously one, on the business side, KYC in the Indian context, KYC, any industry segment is through many of the times is Aadhaar, very well structured, very well secured to my knowledge, so that is covered. The second one is once you bring customer on board, then servicing that customer. Servicing that customer is through your products. Obviously, the security of those products from the journey standpoint are reasonably well established depending on how the product is designed and the pace at which agile transformations of those product journeys happen, they are reasonably there. So that is from your own product journey standpoint. From the customers, how you take them onboarded is making sure that the so-called asterisks in every product that any organization sells, that asterisk terms and conditions apply, they are made clearly known to probably the customer so that they make better decisions of it.
Yeah.
And the second thing, as I mentioned, continuous education and awareness on the privacy rights and also the security vulnerabilities on the product that they are using. If these two are done consistently and then tested, then I think we should reasonably okay.
Okay, I'll go with the last two questions since we are running out of time. The last but one question is the security issue is the same for all, but they are different based on different assets? You know, Sriram, I'll go with you.
It used to be different maybe 18 months ago or maybe 20 months ago, but it is slightly, largely changing because of what we call as nation-state actor-driven third-party off-the-shelf application usage. What is happening is that there are products which are used by every segment of the industry, large, big, small. But if the perpetrator's intention is to say that I'm going to target company X, and that company X is using this A product, and I'm going to meddle with it so that I will have a control on A company's network. But the same product is used by probably a small-time player in maybe a Scandinavia or maybe Asia Pacific, right? You have the key, and the key can open every door, right? But you want to take the door that gives you more money. But at the same time, if you have the capability, you want to know the understanding of other windows or doors, what is behind and capture.
Absolutely.
So from that standpoint, only on that account, which probably we say, you know, an attack of a decade, right? In those circumstances, it is the same, but otherwise, geopolitical, you know, all the other things included, different organizations have different exposures to vulnerabilities.
Understood. Thanks. Sriram, I'll go with you for the last question. You know, a lot of things happening on the banking front, right? Digital lending, payment products, so on and so forth. What is the need for the hour watchouts from a cybersecurity standpoint for the BFSI? Any thoughts? And I'm probably Sidhu, if you have anything to add post Sriram, you can add that.
But which
BFSI,
side?
on the accounting, digital lending, payment products, open banking. The question is,
Yeah. So basically, FinTech is evolving at an incredible pace now. Okay, so a decade from now, it will be very different. I see FinTechs which are there. Of course, they don't have the customer base as yet in India, in which they say that they use NFC and all these things, and say you're having a car, you stop at a petrol bunk or gas station, and then you pull out the credit card. So now the question is that why can't the car pay for itself? So you can just drive through. So in that respect, you see that mobility is going to increase tremendously, and the plethora of devices, 5G, as I had mentioned, IoTs and NFC are going to really probably take the center stage, okay, in over a period of time, not immediately. So these are the large, and then the innovation as the regulatory framework opens up. For example, RBI sandbox and all these things are coming up. As they open up, and there are banks, of course, in Europe and all, which are purely digital banks, no physical presence at all. Okay, as the FinTech landscape really opens up, then you would see, as you unbox it, you would see a lot of innovations coming out. And this is what opens up also the possibilities for cyber attacks and other things, because these are not well thought through. So you need security by design. Okay, in all this, how we make that happen is the big question, through regulations, through industry frameworks, through enforcement, or through laws, so many other things, right? Maturity of them.
Questions, but unfortunately we are out of time, and I would like to thank both you, Sidhu and Sriram, for sharing your views. You guys have such deep knowledge, bountiful knowledge in this space, and I'm sure the audience would greatly benefit from your thoughts, from your views, and from your inputs, very succinct inputs on how to protect your network, what to do. And I hope many of them implement it. And the key message there to take away is users have to be more cognizant about what they do. organizations have to make sure that they invest in security, and that's a very, very key area where, and so do the governments, to make laws for cyber diplomacy and so on and so forth. Thanks for sharing your views, and great to talk to you. I learned a lot talking to you as well, so many thanks.
Where there is life, there is hope, there is meaning. But life has its downs as much as its ups. Life is about challenges. Life is about opportunities. Time for joy, time for celebration, and time to introspect. Thankfully, in every one of life's moments, and even beyond life itself, there's LIC. Where there is life, there's always LIC. Zindagi ke saath bhi, zindagi ke baad bhi.